I sold my business for $70 million, so naturally, I decided to celebrate. I took my husband Evan and my stepdaughter Sophia to the most expensive restaurant in town. I excused myself to answer a phone call. A waiter approached me and said, "It seems your daughter has poured something into your drink." So I went back and intentionally knocked down an empty bottle. In the midst of the chaos, I quickly switched our glasses. 15 minutes later, Sophia's laughter caught in her throat, her face paling as she looked up, her eyes rolling back in her head. She crumpled forward, landing on her plate with a soft thud. "Sophia!" Evan shouted, standing up in a panic. Chaos erupted. The restaurant fell into a frenzy as people rushed to help, a waiter stumbling over his words as he called for paramedics. I sat still, barely moving, my hands gripping the edge of the table. The cold reality of what had just happened settled in, but I didn't move. I didn't show fear. I didn't show anything. Evan's panic mirrored the chaos, but I stayed calm. Too calm, because deep down, I knew. The day Sophia came into our lives, everything seemed like it was falling into place. I remember how she stood in the doorway of our house, just 19 years old, her wide eyes taking in everything. She was thin, almost fragile looking, but there was something about her. A quiet intensity. Evan had told me about his sister's sudden passing a few months before, and how Sophia was now alone, with no one to turn to. Her parents were gone, and the weight of it all seemed to fall on us. He insisted, gently at first, that we open our doors to her. "She just needs some time," he said, his voice carrying that same protective tone he had used when we first got together. "Just until she gets settled. We owe it to her." I couldn't say no. I was supposed to be the strong one. The one who always did the right thing. The one who believed in family no matter what. I welcomed her in, redecorated a guest room for her, tried to make it feel like home. We set up a new life for her, like any good family would. I didn't even question why she had no extended family. No uncles or aunts checking in. No cousins visiting. When she arrived, there was a stiffness about her, a quietness. She seemed distant, unsure of how to fit in. But then again, who wouldn't be? I tried to ease her into our home, making small talk, buying her things I thought she'd need. I bought new bedding, put fresh flowers in her room. I told myself that things would settle. I would teach her, show her what it meant to be a part of a family. I didn't realize how naive I was. Evan was always the charming one. He was good at making people feel comfortable, making them feel like they belonged. But I could see it. Sophia's eyes followed him more than they should have. Too much. I caught the way she would lean in a little too close, the way she'd laugh a little too loudly at his jokes. At first I thought it was just her trying to fit in, to find some comfort in the chaos of losing her parents. But then there were the family dinners. The first one felt so perfect. Evan at the head of the table, me next to him, and Sophia sitting across from us. The food, the wine, the clinking of silverware. It was the picture of normality. But somewhere in the midst of it, the silence grew louder. Every laugh felt a little too forced. Every glance a little too intentional. There were things I couldn't quite explain, things I should have noticed sooner. But I had bigger problems. My company was taking off. It was growing faster than I could manage. The pressure was mounting, and every day felt like a new fire to put out. I was distracted, too busy trying to juggle everything. It was easy to push the nagging feeling about Sophia aside. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted so desperately to believe in this perfect family we were building. The first time I overheard their laughter late at night, I brushed it off. They were just talking. Maybe it was nothing. Just her trying to feel comfortable. Evan being the comforting, charismatic father figure he'd always been. But even as I lay in bed, pretending to sleep, I felt the warmth of something I couldn't place. I could hear their voices, too close, too intimate, their words trailing off into whispers. It was the kind of sound that made your skin prickle, like you were intruding. And yet, I didn't get up. I didn't confront them. I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that it was nothing. After all, I was the one who had chosen to let Sophia stay with us. But Evan began to change too. His late nights at work started to stretch longer, and I didn't hear about his meetings anymore. His excuses became less convincing, and his presence at home grew more erratic. The affectionate gestures that once seemed genuine, the casual touches, the small glances, began to feel like a performance. I had always admired Evan's ability to make people feel special, but now it felt like an act. He said it was the stress of work, of the business growing too quickly, of everything changing. He said he needed space, but somehow the space grew between us too. It became harder to ignore the tension, the unspoken things. And I buried myself in my work. I justified it. I threw myself into the company I had spent so many years building. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought it would fix everything, but it didn't. One evening, as I worked late, trying to draft reports I didn't care about, I found myself staring at the empty seat across from me, the chair that used to be filled by my stepdaughter. I missed the way she used to sit there, her nervous fidgeting under the table. I thought of her quiet smiles, the way she would tell me she was learning to cook, or how she loved the little things I bought her. But now, the empty chair felt like a reflection of the emptiness in my home, a home that I had fought so hard to build, a family that had never been whole. Voiceover: sometimes love blinds us more effectively than any poison. I wanted to believe that things would be fine, that everything would work itself out. But there were cracks, and I was too busy trying to ignore them to see them for what they truly were. Looking back, I realize how much I missed. The way Sophia would smile a little too brightly when Evan entered the room. How she would sit a little too close to him when she thought I wasn't looking. How he began to look at her in a way that made me feel like an outsider in my own life. I mistook silence for peace. And now as I sit here, I realize how dangerous that silence truly was. I don't know when it started, exactly. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Too many hours at work, too many stress-induced headaches. But then, the little things started to pile up. The kind of things that you brush aside until they add up to something you can't ignore. Sophia had been so quiet for the past few weeks, but I couldn't help but notice how often she was on her phone. She'd always been secretive about it, but lately, it was like she was glued to it, never letting it leave her hands. The screen would go dark the moment I walked into the room, her thumb always swiping to close something quickly. When I asked her about it, she'd just give me a tight smile and say she was working on applications for college. But something didn't sit right. She was applying for college? At least, that's what she said. But the more I watched her, the more I started to doubt it. Every time I tried to help, to guide her through the process, she'd shut me down. She'd make excuses, tell me she already knew what she was doing, that I didn't need to worry. She was never open, never willing to let me in. At first, I thought it was just teenage rebellion, a natural part of growing up. But the more I tried to reach her, the more I saw the walls she was putting up. And every wall made me feel like I was losing her, like I was losing control of something I had worked so hard to build. One day, while she was in the shower, I went into her room. Something told me I needed to look. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I knew I was being watched. She was too quiet, too distant. I'd been away for long enough. The silence felt wrong. I stood by her bed, glancing around at the clutter. The clothes scattered across the floor, the untouched books on the desk. It all felt like someone else's life. But then, in the corner of the room, under her pillow, I saw something. A small black phone, almost too sleek to be hers. She'd never had a phone like that. She couldn't afford one, not unless Evan had gotten it for her. I took the phone, my heart pounding. It was locked, of course, but I was no stranger to technology. I figured out the passcode in a few tries. It was a combination of her birthday and Evan's. I should have stopped there. I should have walked away and left it alone. But I didn't. I opened the messages. The texts between Sophia and Evan sent a shiver down my spine. They were flirtatious at first, the kind of harmless text that any father might send to his daughter to make her feel loved. But the longer I read, the more twisted it became. What started as playful teasing quickly turned into something else. A coded message here, an innuendo there. Every message was more inappropriate than the last. I felt sick to my stomach. I thought I'd found a daughter. Turns out, I'd invited a stranger into my home. I dropped the phone, suddenly feeling like the walls were closing in on me. I didn't know what to do with this. It wasn't just that Evan had betrayed me. It was that the very person I had taken in, the person I had trusted, had been hiding something far worse. I wasn't just an outsider to her. I was a fool. I didn't confront her then. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to face it, not yet. So, I shoved the phone back where I'd found it, pretending that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The next few days were tense. I watched Sophia closely, but I didn't say anything. Evan was becoming more distant, too. He'd been spending more time at the office, and I wasn't sure how much I believed that anymore. I'd found myself starting to question everything about him. About us. One night, we fought. I don't even remember what started it. Maybe it was the way he looked at Sophia, the way he touched her arm too gently when he thought I wasn't watching. Maybe it was the way I had been slipping away from him, pushing him farther and farther into his own world. "Why do you keep pulling away?" he shouted, his voice rising. "I'm doing everything I can to keep things together." "Everything?" I snapped, my voice cracking. "Everything? You've been doing everything to destroy everything we've built. Don't pretend like I'm blind to it." Evan's face turned pale, his expression shifting into one I'd never seen before. "What the hell are you talking about?" he growled, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I know about you and Sophia," I said, my voice shaking. "I know everything." For a moment he didn't say anything. Then he laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of relief. It was a laugh of something darker. "Are you sure about that?" he said. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I felt my heart drop. Everything I'd feared, everything I had suspected, was starting to feel real. But I wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. That night, I sat by myself, replaying the messages in my mind. The sweet words, the loving exchanges, the way Evan had responded to Sophia, the way he made her feel special in a way that no father should. The phone had been a digital dagger. I couldn't stop myself from wondering how long this had been going on. How long had I been living in a lie? Voiceover, every message was another knife to my chest. I needed answers. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. But as I sat there waiting for the morning, I realized there was no going back. The perfect family I had tried to create? It was a facade, one that was crumbling faster than I could hold on. I never thought I'd find myself here. Sitting in a small, dimly lit office, across from someone who specialized in finding truths I wasn't sure I even wanted to know. But as I sat there, the heavy scent of coffee in the air and the hum of the city outside, I knew there was no turning back. Detective Marcus Hayes leaned forward, his steely eyes never leaving mine. He didn't say much, but I could see the questions burning behind his calm expression. I was the one who had to speak. I was the one who had to let him in. "I think someone's been trying to kill me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply nodded, as if it was just another day for him. "Tell me everything." So, I did. I told him about the dinner at the restaurant, about the waiter's warning, the switch of the glasses, and Sophia's collapse. I told him how I had found the texts between her and Evan, how they had been flirting, then something more. How I had felt the walls closing in around me, the weight of the deception pressing down harder with each passing hour. Marcus listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask for more details, just listened. It felt strange, like I was confessing, but I wasn't sure to whom. Maybe to myself. Once I was done, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, his brow furrowed in thought. "I'll look into it," he said quietly. "But I need to know everything. Not just the poisoning, but everything. If what you're saying is true, this goes deeper than just a family betrayal." The days that followed were a blur. I spent them at home, waiting for the phone to ring, for Marcus to find something, anything, that would explain what had happened. I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. My mind kept drifting back to that moment when I realized I didn't know who I had invited into my life, who I had loved, who I had trusted. When the call finally came, I was almost afraid to answer it, but I did. "Rachel," Marcus said, his voice tight with a professionalism I had come to expect. "I've been digging into Sophia's records. Something's wrong. Nothing checks out. I've found falsified documents, birth certificates. The name of her deceased mother doesn't even exist. Her history is a lie." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook as I gripped the phone, the reality of it settling in. "What do you mean, nothing checks out?" "Sophia's last name was changed a year ago," Marcus continued. "Before she ever came into your life. She's not who she says she is, Rachel, and I'm just getting started. I sat there, stunned, hearing only the pounding of my heart in my ears. For years I had opened my heart to her, believed in her. And now every single memory with her seemed tainted. Is there more? I asked, my voice trembling. There's more. Evan's been wiring money into an untraceable account. I've traced it back to a private offshore account under his name. And I can't confirm where that money is going, but it's definitely not for your benefit. The words hit me like a slap across the face. I felt dizzy, unmoored. But why? Why would he do this? That's the million-dollar question, Marcus replied. His tone clipped. I'm digging into Sophia's past now. I found something disturbing. She used to date older men, wealthy ones, men who could give her what she wanted. The pieces were falling into place, the slow, insidious picture of what I had been living in, and with every new revelation, I realized how much I had been kept in the dark. Marcus paused for a beat, the silence hanging in the air between us. Rachel, I'm sorry to say this, but it looks like they've been planning this for years. Your death, your wealth, everything. I felt the floor drop out from under me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The darkness in my room mirrored the growing darkness in my mind. What had I missed? All those years, all those moments I had thought were genuine. I could see it now. The way Evan had reassured me every time I felt uneasy. The way Sophia had clung to me, pretending to be the daughter I had never asked for, never truly needed. In the quiet of the night, I couldn't help but remember the family dinners. How I had tried so hard to make it work, to create something real. The moments when I felt like I was finally building a family, when I could almost believe that we were all in this together. It was a fantasy, a dream I had woven for myself, one that had shattered the moment I realized the truth. I thought of Sophia's fake compassion, of Evan's empty reassurances, of the life we had built, the life that had been nothing but a trap. Voiceover, I thought I'd built a family. Turns out, I'd built a trap, and stepped into it myself. Marcus's final words echoed in my head, as I sat by the window the next morning, staring out at the world that felt like it was slipping away. My illusions had crumbled, and now there was nothing but the stark, ugly truth. The betrayal had run deeper than I ever could have imagined. I had let them in, I had trusted them, and now I had to decide what to do with this knowledge. The first thing I did after Marcus called was pick up the phone. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. The toxicology report had come in, and the words on the page hit me like a blow to the chest. It was poison, a slow-acting toxin that would have taken hours to show symptoms. If I hadn't switched the glasses, I wouldn't be here. I would have been dead. It was hard to breathe, the weight of it all pressing down on me, but I forced myself to stay calm. The realization wasn't a shock, not really. Not anymore. I had suspected it for so long, but hearing it confirmed made the pain sharper. The thing I had feared most had already happened in their minds. I had become expendable. They intended to kill me, I whispered aloud to myself. Marcus had warned me not to confront them yet. Patience, Rachel, he'd said. We need more than just the toxicology report. We need proof that this wasn't a one-time thing. I wasn't sure what else I needed to hear, but there was no going back now. I couldn't let them get away with it. The night of the restaurant felt like a dream now. I kept replaying it in my head over and over. How could I have missed it? Sophia's too bright smile, Evan's nervous energy. They had been so confident, so sure that I wouldn't figure it out. The waiter's words echoed in my mind, his terrified expression as he warned me. And the glass. The damn glass. The poison. I thought about it every time I looked at the wine glasses in our house. How casually they tried to kill me. It made my blood burn. My fingers twitch with an anger I had never allowed myself to feel before, but that wasn't useful. Anger wasn't going to get me what I wanted. I needed to be calm, cold, controlled. I couldn't confront them, not yet. I had to be smart about this. I needed evidence, and I needed it all. I didn't waste any time. The next morning, I started setting up cameras in the house. In the living room, the kitchen, the hallways. I knew Sophia and Evan had their little secrets, but I had learned to keep quiet. Now I needed to listen. I started recording everything. Conversations between Evan and Sophia when they thought I wasn't listening. Their whispers at night, the quiet murmurs of planning, the way their words always seemed to trail off when I walked in the room. I wanted to hear it all. Evan's late-night calls were the first to catch my attention. He thought the doors were locked, the house asleep, but I had always been a light sleeper. He was too careful, too practiced in hiding the truth, but there was something in the way he spoke on the phone. He was tense, the words short, clipped, business. Always business. But there was an edge to it now. There was more to those calls than just work. I couldn't help but wonder how many of these calls had been about me. How many times had he talked to Sophia about how to get rid of me? How many times had they planned the next step, the next move? I watched Sophia more closely. The cameras caught little moments that I would have missed. The way she always locked the bathroom door when she took a shower, the way she avoided the family dinners, always making excuses about late-night study sessions or friends. It wasn't like her. The girl I'd tried to raise would have never treated me like this. One afternoon, I saw her leave the house with a package in hand, looking over her shoulder to make sure no one was following her. I didn't know where she was going, but I knew I had to follow. I kept my distance, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Like the moment I stepped out of the house, I was a pawn in their game. She went to a lawyer's office. I parked across the street, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't get too close, but I could see her through the windows. She sat down, talking to the lawyer, flipping through papers that I couldn't see. The lawyer smiled, nodded, and handed her a folder. I couldn't tell what was in it, but I had a sick feeling in my gut. When she left, the folder was tucked under her arm, hidden, but not well enough. I followed her to her car, and when she turned the corner, I slipped into the office. The receptionist looked at me briefly before returning to her work, too busy to care about the woman in the corner. I slipped past her, into the same office Sophia had just been in. The door was slightly ajar, and I caught a glimpse of the papers on the desk. I found the documents hidden in the drawer. Forged insurance papers. The beneficiary names: Evan Monroe. Sophia Monroe. My throat went dry as I read through the details. They were going to get everything. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was official now. The betrayal wasn't just about the poisoning. It was about everything. The lies, the planning. They had been working together for years. They had been waiting for this moment, for me to disappear, for me to die, so they could claim everything I had built. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I stood in the office, the papers still clutched in my hand, and for the first time since I had walked into this mess, I finally understood the stakes. It wasn't just about taking them down. It was about protecting myself, about taking back what was mine. Voiceover: revenge isn't rage, it's precision. I would do this on my terms. I wouldn't rush into this like a mad woman seeking vengeance. No. I would play it carefully, like a chess game. I would wait. I would collect every scrap of evidence, every lie they had hidden from me, and when the time was right, I would make my move. They had taught me how to kill trust. Now I'd teach them how it felt. It was almost too easy to pretend. I had never been great at lying, but then again, I didn't need to lie. I just needed to smile, nod, let them think they had won. After all, I had been the fool for so long. What harm could a little more pretending do? Evan looked at me with such a look of relief that it almost made me sick. He didn't know. He had no idea what I had uncovered, what I had seen, what I knew. He just thought everything was back to normal. He thought he had me fooled, but I had him exactly where I wanted him. "I've been thinking," I said, as we sat down for another dinner, the evening light casting long shadows through the windows. "I think we've all been through so much. Maybe it's time we forgive and move forward." His eyes widened, and Sophia's posture stiffened. They both exchanged quick, silent glances, the kind of glance people share when they think they've gotten away with something, when they don't want to admit it's too good to be true. "Forgiveness?" Evan asked, his voice low, almost too calm. "You really mean that?" I smiled, thin and practiced. "I do. I know we've had our issues, but what's the point of holding on to all of this anger?" Sophia's lips quirked upward, a shadow of suspicion in her eyes, but I could tell she didn't fully understand my game yet. She wouldn't. Not until it was too late. "Well, I'm glad you're ready to move on," Evan said, his relief palpable, but I noticed a hint of doubt in the way he avoided looking directly at me. He still had no idea what was coming. The next few weeks passed in a strange, calculated silence. I played the role of the dutiful wife, the forgiving stepmother, while silently, methodically, I took back control. I gained access to their joint accounts, accessing the passwords that Evan thought he'd kept hidden. The accounts were full of money that didn't belong to him, wires to untraceable accounts, deposits under Sophia's name, and I could see it now, all the little ways they'd prepared for their future without me. Marcus helped me trace their hidden investments, leading me to a series of offshore accounts and shell companies, ones I would have never suspected. The deeper I dug, the more disgusted I became. Evan and Sophia were so comfortable in their deceit, they had no idea I was 2 steps ahead. I didn't just sit back and watch, I acted, quietly. I transferred assets out of their accounts, silently, unnoticed. Just like their betrayal had been, just like the poison in that glass, slow and steady. Sophia grew suspicious. I could see it in the way she eyed me at dinner, the way she looked over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't looking. She was still trying to play her part, pretending everything was fine. But she was starting to crack. The phone calls with Evan were no longer innocent, no longer simple discussions. She was starting to get nervous, questioning me when I asked too many questions. But she dismissed it quickly enough. I was careful. Everything I did was careful. I knew they'd be watching. They had to be. But there were moments when I needed to send a message. To them. To myself. So I did. I bought Evan a new watch, sleek and modern. Something that looked too expensive for a man who never cared about such things. I had it bugged, of course. I wanted to hear everything. I wanted to know exactly what they were planning, how far they'd go. The conversations that came through it were everything I had expected. The hushed tones, the plans for their future without me. Evan would speak in that quiet, rehearsed voice, the one he used when he thought he was still in control. But the lies slipped through. The way he reassured Sophia, the way he spoke about the next phase of their plan, about how soon it would all be over. I knew they were planning to move quickly, but they didn't know I was already 1 step ahead. I sent those recordings to my lawyer, every last one. A detailed file, a clear picture of what they had been trying to do. I made sure that the truth was locked down, that I had everything. No more doubts, no more lies. I wasn't going to just expose them. I was going to let them destroy themselves. There was a moment, just one, when I let myself feel the weight of it all. Sitting at the dinner table, watching Evan and Sophia laugh too loudly, too easily, I almost let myself believe they had gotten away with it. The dinner table. A place I had once thought of as a symbol of unity, of family. Now it was nothing more than a weapon. The place where their lies had unfolded, where I had to act, where I had to smile through the poison. I had invited them into my life, trusted them, loved them, and now I would make them pay for it. They had no idea what I was planning. I had convinced myself I was still the victim, still the woman they had deceived. But that was part of it. That was the mask I wore. I had become a player in my own game, and I was learning to love it. I couldn't let anger cloud my judgment, even though it churned beneath my skin like a beast waiting to be freed. This wasn't about rage. It wasn't about wild, unchecked vengeance. This was about precision, about control. They had taught me how to kill trust. Now I would teach them how it felt. I never believed I'd be the kind of person to go public with something like this. But somewhere between the lies, the betrayals, and the slow, creeping realization that everything I'd built had been a carefully constructed illusion, I knew I had no other choice. The moment I hit post was one I'll never forget. My hands were steady, my heart calm, if not a little too calm. I stared at the screen, watching the video upload spin. A few seconds passed, and the world I'd once known began to unravel. The recordings, the ones I had so carefully gathered, were all there. The lies, the manipulation, the proof of their affair, their plans, the secretive conversations that now had a face. My husband and my stepdaughter, in their own words, exposed for the world to see. The details of their murder plot, their conspiracy. Every vile truth, wrapped up in the cold, unforgiving glare of reality. I typed the caption with a quiet finality. Justice served cold. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second guess. I pressed post. And then, I sat back and watched it all unfold. The notifications came in slowly at first. Likes, shares, comments. But then, like a wave, it began to swell. The videos hit social media, and within hours, they were everywhere. News outlets, Twitter feeds, Instagram stories, people couldn't stop talking about it. Evan's face. Sophia's face. There was nowhere they could hide. It was as if their entire existence had been reduced to nothing more than the truth of their betrayal. Friends, people I had trusted for years, turned on them immediately. Texts and calls flooded in, but I didn't respond. There was nothing to say anymore. They had played their hand. Now the world would see the cards they'd kept hidden. The shame, the humiliation. It was inevitable. But it wasn't mine. It didn't take long for Evan to come to me. He barged in through the front door like a storm, his face flushed with fury. "What the hell is this, Rachel?" His voice was low, filled with that same smoothness he used when he wanted to convince me of something, when he wanted me to believe in his lies. I said nothing. I didn't have to. The truth had already been spoken. "You can't just ruin everything like this," he spat, stepping toward me. "You're making a fool of both of us." I stayed silent. I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on the view outside the window, the bright lights of the city that had once been ours. My calmness only seemed to frustrate him more. "Say something," he demanded. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze for the first time since he walked in. "What is there to say?" I asked quietly, a hint of an edge to my voice. "You already said everything you needed to. Everyone knows now, everything is out in the open." He froze, his eyes widening. The anger in his face faded slightly, replaced with something darker. Fear. For the first time in years, he was afraid of me. But he still tried to defend himself, as if it mattered. "You don't understand. I did this for us." I didn't let him finish. "No, you did it for you, and you did it behind my back, for years." His mouth opened and closed, the words failing him. I watched him squirm in that moment, realizing that for all the control he thought he had over me, it was all gone now. Meanwhile, Sophia was already gone. She fled the house within hours of the videos going live. Her panic was evident. I didn't follow her, didn't chase after her. I simply watched her slip into the car, the paparazzi swarming like vultures. I could hear their cameras clicking in the distance, their voices rising as they tried to catch a glimpse of her before she drove off. They had her now. She was the prey, and she didn't even realize how much she had exposed herself. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel anything for her. I only watched, calm, detached. I didn't need to say anything. The world had already spoken for me. Marcus called later that night. "I have to say, Rachel, you did it," he said, his voice oddly impressed. "This is just the beginning, though. Don't get complacent. You've got them right where you want them." "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was no need for more words. Marcus understood. He'd been there, watching the whole thing unfold from behind the scenes, helping me gather evidence, guiding me with patience. But now? Now it was my show. "We'll make sure they don't get away with it," Marcus continued. "The police are already moving in." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. A few hours later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a team of officers standing on the porch, their badges shining under the porch light. "We have a warrant for Evan Monroe and Sophia Monroe," one of them said, holding up a piece of paper. "We need to search the premises." I didn't flinch. "Come right in," I said, stepping aside. As the officers went through the house, I stood in the hallway, calm. They were just doing their jobs, but for me, this was the final confirmation. Evan and Sophia were not going to escape this. They were going to pay for what they did, for everything they had taken from me. On the first day of the trial, I arrived at the courthouse early. The weight of the day's events felt different somehow, heavier, maybe because I knew this was the moment everything would change. The truth had already been exposed, but now, it was time for them to face the consequences. I sat in the back, in the shadows of the courtroom, my eyes fixed on the stand where Evan and Sophia sat. I didn't show them the satisfaction I was feeling. I didn't even look at them for long. I was here for justice, And justice didn't require me to feel anything but calm. The doors opened, and the room filled with the rustle of suits and whispers. The gavel struck, the judge called the court to order, and the trial began. Marcus was called to the stand first. He walked up with that quiet, steady confidence of someone who had seen it all. He wasn't fazed by the glaring eyes or the cameras flashing. His testimony was precise, methodical. He spoke about the investigation, the evidence he had gathered, the calls, the wire transfers, the forged documents. Piece by piece, he laid out their conspiracy. He didn't even need to explain the depth of their betrayal. The facts spoke for themselves. I could see Evan squirming in his seat, his face flushed as he tried to hide his panic. Sophia, on the other hand, was stone-faced. But I could tell she was crumbling inside. She wasn't as good at hiding the truth as she thought she was. Every word Marcus spoke, every piece of evidence he presented, chipped away at the walls she built around herself. When it was Evan's turn to speak, his defense was exactly what I had expected. He stood tall, his voice a little too smooth, and he pointed the finger at Sophia. "I didn't know what she was planning," he said, his voice shaking only slightly. "I trusted her. I never meant for any of this to happen. If anyone should be blamed, it's her." I almost laughed. He had no idea what kind of hole he was digging for himself. But the world was watching now. The jury was listening. Sophia's silence was deafening. And it happened. Sophia, who had been so silent, so composed, finally broke. Her shoulders trembled, and her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to stop," she said, her voice a raw whisper. "I didn't know what I was getting into. He told me he would leave her. He told me I was the one he wanted." She broke down completely, her sobs echoing in the courtroom. The room went silent, the air thick with disbelief. I stayed still, unmoving, watching as the lies fell apart. She was a child, yes, but she had chosen this. She had chosen him, and now she was paying the price. Her tears didn't move me. They weren't for the right reasons. Rachel, the mother who had raised her, was no longer a victim. Her confession was the final nail in their coffin. The evidence, the recordings, the wire transfers, the poison, it all came together. The courtroom gasped when they heard the recordings that I had so carefully preserved, their words now irrefutable proof of their crime. It was over. The weight of it all settled in. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel joy. I just felt detached. This was what needed to happen. This was the right thing. The verdict came down swiftly. Evan was convicted of wire fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 25 years. Sophia, too, was convicted on all counts, but because of her age, she was sentenced to 15 years. As the gavel struck and the court's ruling was made official, I stayed seated. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I had already won. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing like a swarm of angry bees. But I didn't answer their questions. I didn't need to. I had nothing left to prove. I was done. I had exposed them and they had received what they deserved. I didn't give a statement. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of hearing my voice. Silence was the only victory worth having. I didn't watch the sentencing live. I couldn't. I had already seen enough. But when the notification came through on my phone, telling me that Evan had been sentenced to 25 years and Sophia to 15, I felt nothing. It was the final chapter in a story I had already closed. I was alone in my living room, the same place where all of this had begun. The weight of everything hit me then, like a storm breaking over the horizon. The illusion of family, the betrayal, the years I had lost trusting them. I felt the emptiness creeping back in. It wasn't just their guilt that weighed on me. It was the realization that I had been so blind, so willing to forgive, when I shouldn't have been. The next few days were a blur of media attention. The story of Evan and Sophia's downfall ran across every news outlet, every social media feed. They were villains now, their names linked forever to their crimes. There was no escape from the shame, no place to hide. Clara came by one evening, her face a mixture of concern and relief. "You did it, Rachel. You survived." Her words meant more than she knew. I had survived. But at what cost? That night, I went back to my journal, the first entry in years. I poured out my thoughts, my reflections, my guilt, my anger. I hadn't written in so long, but tonight it felt necessary. I had to write down what had happened, what I had learned, what I had lost. Marcus retired not long after the trial. He left a note on my desk, folded carefully with a simple message: "You deserved better." The words hung in the air. They made me think. Marcus had been there when no one else was. He had been my silent ally in the shadows. He had given me the strength to go forward when I wanted to back down. I sold my company after the trial. I didn't need the mansion. I didn't need the life I had built around them. I sold it all, gave a good portion to charity, and moved to the countryside. I found peace there. Silence. A world far removed from the chaos. The first time I stood in front of the company headquarters, after everything had been cleared away, I looked at my reflection in the glass doors. I didn't recognize the woman I saw, not because of the change in appearance, but because of what I had learned. The woman staring back was no longer broken. She was whole. I forgave myself, not for them, for me. I never thought I'd be back here. Not after everything. Not after the trial, the exposure, the betrayal. But here I was, sitting in the same restaurant where it all began. The atmosphere hadn't changed. The same hushed tones, the same soft lighting casting shadows on the polished wood tables. It was as if nothing had shifted, as if the world outside hadn't come crashing down on me and left me to rebuild everything from the ground up. But as I sat there, the weight of the past few months finally felt like it had been lifted. The tension that had once constricted my chest, that feeling of being trapped, it was gone. I was free. The waiter approached me with a faint, polite smile. "Different company tonight?" he asked, his voice soft, like he was hesitant to ask anything personal. I smiled faintly, the corners of my lips lifting slightly. "I'm alone tonight," I said, letting the words settle between us. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't need to. I watched him move away, his silhouette blending with the soft lighting, and I felt the calm wash over me again. This was my moment. The moment where everything, all the years of pain, the anger, the revenge, settled into something peaceful. There was no more need for confrontation, no more need for violence, for deceit. It was just me now. And that was enough. The glass in front of me was filled with water this time, not wine. I raised it slowly, letting my fingers trace the rim, the coolness of the glass grounding me in the present. I'd been so consumed by the bitterness of the past for so long. But now, the only thing left was the taste of relief, the taste of survival. The flashbacks came quickly, unbidden. I saw myself sitting at this same table months ago, my pulse racing as I tried to make sense of the chaos. I saw the tension between Evan and Sophia, the lies that were wrapped in warmth, in promises of family. I saw myself laughing, smiling, trusting, all the while unaware of the poison that was brewing beneath the surface. But those moments were behind me now. Gone. They didn't define me anymore. They were nothing more than memories, pieces of a puzzle I had solved long ago. A montage played in my mind, one that was both distant and painfully close. The years of love, the years of trust, the years of giving everything for a family that wasn't real. The nights I spent crying in silence. The nights I spent wondering what had gone wrong. The day I uncovered the truth. The betrayal that shattered everything I thought I knew. Then came the revenge, the release of the recordings, the silent calm I held while the storm of their lies tore them apart. Evan and Sophia, once the people closest to me, had been reduced to nothing. The courtroom, the police, the public humiliation, they were all just pieces in a game I'd long since learned to control. I finished my water, placed the glass gently on the table, and looked up at the door. I didn't know what I was waiting for, exactly. Maybe just a sign that it was all truly over. The image of Evan and Sophia behind bars flashed into my mind. Their faces, once filled with arrogance and self-assurance, now broken and defeated. Their lives torn apart by their own choices. They thought they could steal my peace, my life, my future. But in the end, it was their own downfall that came. They hadn't taken anything from me. They had only given me the strength to rebuild. The waiter returned. this time with the check. He didn't ask if I wanted anything else, just placed it down in front of me and walked away. I paid without hesitation. This dinner, this place, was no longer tied to the pain of the past. It was simply a meal, a symbol of where I had been and where I was going. I left the restaurant quietly, the crisp night air brushing against my skin. I slid into my car, the engine humming to life as I pulled out of the parking lot. The city lights blurred by the window as I drove, the steady rhythm of the tires on the road comforting, steady. As I turned the corner, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My face looked different somehow. Softer, more at peace. The woman staring back at me was calm, unbroken. There was no anger, no grief left in her. She was whole. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was behind me, and ahead of me was a future I was finally ready to embrace. The camera lingered on my face in the rearview mirror as I drove through the night. The final shot framed me perfectly, serene, composed, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had fought and won. I had found my peace. I had found my liberation. If you've enjoyed this journey with me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice.